Tuesday, January 27th, 2026. Natalie, will you please conduct roll call?
Yes. Derek Wharf,
Here.
Einen Burkle,
Here.
Mary Meyer, Isha Adams. She said she was going to participate virtually, but has not yet joined. So I'll keep an eye out for her. Derek Duff, absent. Ned Knight,
Here.
Ron Sinicki.
Here.
Roger Coleman.
Here.
And Raquel, we know she's excused absent. And then Peggy Kilberg.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, time for Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, we'll now open the meeting to public comments. Natalie, do we have any public comments tonight?
No public comments.
Okay, if none, then I'll close the public comment session. And then on to the overview of utility rate presentations. Turn it over to staff for introductions and presentations.
So before we got into this, I just wanted to show you guys the handout that we included on the utility bills. So based on the comments we got last time about the water and sewer service fees being lumped in with consumption, Sharon in utility billing was able to go in there and make those adjustments on the new billings. So we were able to break out the flat fees from the consumption fees on there. So I think that's what you guys were requesting. So we just wanted to show you guys the changes that we're making that we'll be able to roll out on the next bill. If that looks good to you guys, then we will move forward with this.
And we call that customer service the Newburgh way.
Thanks for doing that.
Thank you to Sharon.
I can't decide if I like it or not because that service fee is so awful on the sewer. But yeah, it is what it is. We know why it's there.
Did you think I was going to say that on the mic? Okay. So to make the clicker work, you're going to have to click on the. Aha! Here we go. No, it's not working. Okay. Oh, yes. Yes, the USB dongle is still in the device. I did not know. So at this point, I'll have to come up with another joke, I guess, while we wait a bit more. Do you know the one with the termite? He goes into the bar. He says, "Where is it tender?" Okay. Yay! Okay, this is the water projects, and just like last time, I'm going to kick off with ones that are happening right now or are in the rear view mirror, and then move into future ones. So the first one is the Oak Knoll Booster Pump Station. This one is finished, and this one was over $150,000 under budget because the staff built the casing in the housing that holds all the parts for the Oak Knoll Booster Station. We also reused the old pumps, although we had to strip them back and put in bearings and use new sealant. So we didn't end up having to buy the new pumps. We used the old pumps that were from 2016, and they worked really hard, and this one was a tremendous victory. This also got all of the water pressure higher in that Oak Knoll area which helps with fire safety. And it's just, this is how it should be done, folks. Okay, the water plant basin covers, this isn't finished yet. The budget price is $920. We're 90% complete, and we expect to be finished in this month, all going well. There's a few parts that are still waiting to be delivered. This is one of these projects that I didn't want to do. This is mandated by DEQ based on very weak science. They're saying that we have to cover these basins in order to keep the water safer or cleaner. But in fact, we're removing the UV light that used to help in an antiseptic sense with the water. And we're actually going to be adding a risk of mold because it's going to be an enclosure, which meant we have to add extractor fans and make it more heavily engineered. But we have to obey our masters.
Quick question.
Yes, sir.
Just curious, is that second lower photo showing like partially covered? And what material is used for the cover that ends up costing so much?
Actually, this here is not covered at all. This is as it was before we started work. The large ponds are going to get retractable fabric structures, but the fabric has to be a specific, highly expensive type of fabric as specified by them. The
Okay.
cheaper ones will be the basins. The 3 small basins just get to be steel sheds, which are very affordable, but it's the cost of the retractable cover for the bigger ponds. The only other alternative, which would have been $1.5 million, is covering the entire site with a new structure, which obviously we didn't want to do. In fact, we didn't want to do any of this. It's a waste of money.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, we also currently in this biennium are still holding on to $300,000 of unknown discovery money, as I call it. You never know what you're going to find when you go below grade. So one of the things we did in our reform in engineering was to add this placeholder just in case we come across something unexpected. Hasn't happened yet. And now I'm going to talk about other projects that are not finished or finishing soon, but are ongoing and into the future a little bit. And at this juncture, I'm going to defer over to HB 2001 discussion from Brett. Oh, so, okay, sorry. Because you know more about this than I do. Yeah. I'll do the clicking if you like. Okay. Yes, thank you, sir.
Yes.
He's in charge of this one and it's massive.
So this is a project that came about through our waste, when we were updated the wastewater, the master plans in 21 to deal with the riverfront. So this came out of the infrastructure-based time extension request for development for related to middle housing. So that led to an update to identify if there was any infrastructure weaknesses within the systems. And the only one that came up during that process was the water system having high velocities when delivering fire flows greater than what a single family house or a duplex requires. So that led to this project. And there was a total of 9 projects. 2 of them have already been completed that are not in this program as we're developed this. And so there's 1,200 feet of water mains left to be replaced in south of downtown. This also includes the replacement of the old cast iron pipes, and they're part of what was describing that other project for that unknowns and things. There's an annual pipe replacement project as well. And so this actually will take care of some of those projects that would have wound up on that system as well. So it's not just the upsizing to deal with the wastewater, so we can advance. And this is just the locations of where those are at. The ones circled in red are the ones that are in progress, working in design right now. The I-4 one, we're actually pulling that out of this program and moving it forward to deal with pavement preservation project that is coming up on that street. And so that one's kind of been pulled out separate to move that forward. And I believe they're putting that out to bid, if not today. If it didn't go out today, it'll be in very shortly.
Because it would be obviously foolish of us to use tough money to do grind and inlay over the section and then dig it up in a year.
And continue. And this is just the description with the list of where the locations are, the various locations broken up into segments. And we're working this under one program Ideally, we've got designs at 95 to 100% for all of this right now, and then we're working through a bidding process, or look, we're working through pursuing an alternative bidding process to bring qualifications based involved into this as well, so.
So as you can see, and Brett's handling this because this has a whole bunch of land use minutiae associated with it because it goes all the way through many parts of downtown. And so he's working along with Scott Siegel and people in that team as well to manage this complicated project.
Next slide. And this just shows that distribution of where the projects are, then also the amount of cast iron versus ductile iron. Some of the ductile iron that we're replacing are smaller lines. They're 6-inch mains or 8-inch that need to be upsized to 10 to 12 to get the pipe velocities down when those higher fire flows are anticipated.
Thank you. Okay, so if you've got any later questions about HB 2001, Brett can answer those because that is a complicated project. And I sometimes play an engineer on TV, but I certainly am not an engineer. The next one is the Main Street water main project, and you can see the estimated price there. The Main Street has to fix several issues. The pipe constricts in one section, so that interferes with flow because it goes from 6 to 4 and back to 6, which causes pressure issues. And this is also fiddly because part of it, we have to get the permission from the railroad, which remarkably we got fairly quickly. Remarkably, we applied and only 2 months later, we had our permit to do this. So we're moving along quite fast with this one. I don't have an estimated end date yet because there's still some more design steps. And then the groundwater treatment plant. Now I want to highlight this because although we are not listing projects that we're not certain about in the medium term, I kept this in the current model because this is a necessity. There's no way around this. So as we look out into the future, in the 2030s, Newburgh is going to need more water than it can produce. So let me be clear about what that means. It does not mean that the well site cannot supply the amount of water that we need. The well site can supply as much as 10 megagallons. The problem will be the current plant can't process more than 5.5 megagallons a day working flat out. And in the early 2030s, depending on the rate of housing construction, which is the unknown, we are going to hit that number. So we need to have a water plant going before that. And rationally, we'd like to think about a 9 megagallon plant that's extensible, so we can blow out a wall later and add on more filters rather than having to build a completely new plant. That's different from the plant we have today, and that's how we're going to build this plant. And I hope to still be here to take a victory lap as that plant goes into operation. So you can see we can't get there 100% from rates. We don't intend to. We're going to have to do some kind of bonding action, some kind of levy action if we can't get federal or state funding to help close that delta. It's a huge project. And as you see at the moment, the likely cost would be $45 to $50 million. We don't know what that's going to do though over the next 6-7 years. But we have done some things already. We've done a geotechnical study, which we've paid for and completed. We have found a location that is seismically stable. It's not liquefiable soil. That will reduce the cost of the pylons that we have to build. We'll be able to just build a normal substrate with a normal depth of concrete. It won't have to have deep pylons. Those are really expensive. We're trying to get our ending fund balance up to where we can try to have half of the money in cash to deal with this. And we're going to make sure that the plant can be extended into the future. Yes, sir.
Where does the city of Dundee get their water now?
Currently, the city of Dundee has numerous well fields. I don't remember the exact number. Brett, do you recall how many? I'm guessing, I think it's 4 or 5 wells. And they have a slightly different problem than ours. They have a capacity problem, not a production problem. So they know that in order to build up their housing stock, they need to have more supply on the nature side. So it's not a question of a plant, it's a question of their wells can't produce as much.
Is there any interconnection now between Newburgh system and the Dundee system?
What a wonderfully timely question. No, there is not. However, just this week, Senator Starr called me and said there is a possibility of us getting some money from the Oregon Lottery if we fill out the paperwork quickly. So it's one of these sudden things. And what I would do with it is, if the Dundee folks agree, and I've been speaking to their new city manager yesterday about this, if they're interested in going together on this, they could come in with me for a joint application to create a pipe that would connect our two systems. So I'm waiting to hear back, but I don't have a lot of time. So if there's anyone from Dundee listening tonight, I do need to file that paperwork as was requested by the senator by Friday. That's Friday of this week. And that is the end of our exploration of water projects, past and future, highlighting the big one.
I have another question. Didn't the city a few years ago purchase capacity that was for the old mill? Yeah.
The city purchased water rights. Now, that was a wise move just because. So as long as we use those, and I've got an Outlook reminder, which I'm going to pass on to my successor. Can you recall, Brett, how many years till we have to start doing some 25 or something? I think it's 25 years. So we will make sure that we use them in some capacity before we run out of time. But having those water rights was just a smart thing to do. Even though we are working from a well field, and for the foreseeable future, we will continue to work from our Marion County well field. Thanks, folks.
I have another question for you, Will. What would it take to use those water rights?
The question was, what would it take to use our water rights? We would have to purify water out of the river. So in other words, we would have to have some kind of deliberate use of the water rights. And I think that could be done potentially by doing an emergency drill, using water purification pods or something. At least our attorneys in 25 years will argue that that is possible.
All right, so we'll talk about we'll do a similar presentation as we did for sewer, and a little bit about the trends in water rates, and then look at the forecasts to support the capital projects that Will just reviewed. So like the wastewater system, water rates are the primary funding source for the water system. There are some other fees and charges that are for things like fire hydrant permits, connection charges, development review that crosses all the different utilities. So the specific services, but 90%, close to 90% of the funding, 86% in this case, comes from water rates. And as we know, systems development charges can only be used for growth-related capital. The water rate history, I only go back to 2013, 2014 because it was, I think it's illustrative of, in some cases, oh, yes.
I have a question. That was, that was showing fiscal year 2026, so it's not the 2-year biennial or biennium? Yes.
That is for.
Just for 1 year, not.
Just for
2
1 year,
years.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I know you guys do a 2-year budget now, but we look at cash flow from a annual basis. Yeah, thanks. So the water rate history here goes back to 2013-14 because I think it's important to understand at times there are pressures to keep rate increases to a minimum and sometimes zero. And the danger of that, of course, is that future increases then, in this case, had to be significantly higher than inflation because of the no increase in 2013. There was some shuffling around of staff and cutting of capital because the city was in was in danger of not complying with the debt service coverage requirements that the lending agencies require when the loans are issued. And so there was that was a high stress rate setting period. And then you can see what happened in 2015, 2016. The capital needed to be done, the expenses were still there, and so the rate increase jumped up pretty significantly to 7% for 2 years. Then there was anticipation of the water system master plan coming down the road, so it was really just an inflationary increase for a couple of years, and then the master plan was completed. This was before we got into the crazy inflation period during COVID and post-COVID. So 4% was so just slightly above what inflation was trending at the time was for the next several years. And then once the full effects of inflation really took hold and the water treatment plant replacement costs ballooning and other costs as well, HB 2001 and all of those that were just discussed, then the rate increase was increased to the 5%, which is what was implemented in 25 and just a few weeks ago in the start of 2026.
Can I say a quick thing? about the
Please.
water plant? So I think it's a useful little inflation thing for our brains, right? In 2020, 2021, we thought the water plant from estimates at that time was going to be $21.5 million. And the estimates for that same plant today is $45 to $50 million. So think about how things have exploded. So it's so hard for a city to plan to build something when that happens. Not even eggs have gone up that much.
So I showed this slide last time, but I thought it was worth showing again, just because water, like sewer, has tended to, when we look at national trends, be about double the rate of inflation. Inflation as measured by the Consumer Price Index, and we talked about last time that the CPI, even though that's something that folks are most familiar with, the basket of goods that are measured in that are not directly transferable to infrastructure, different types of increases. So that thus the higher rate increases that folks are, all agencies are facing across the nation. So we go through the same process we did for sewer in looking at the forecasting costs and revenues and considering the current budget and other economic factors, like luckily lowering inflation, though we haven't seen, it's important that we really haven't seen costs come down per se. It's just the rate of growth is lower. And so as we'll discuss, we have significant capital improvements, some regulated, based on the regulatory environment, and some based on growth. And there are still some existing debt service from prior investments. This table shows you just the annual costs associated with projects that we'll discuss. And of course, right now, we're using 45 million as the planning target for the water plant. Unlike sewer, which was front-loaded, this one is very much back-loaded, though there are still $2.5 million per year of improvements needed in the current budget biennium. And from there, some finishing up of the HB 2001 program costs and ongoing replacement. As was discussed, this needs to be a $45 million investment, needs to be funded through some kind of bond. What we have incorporated into the financial plan at this point would be a property tax bond. So not at least some of it, a big chunk of it, the 32 million. Yeah, sure.
And there was a time when I actually thought we could get to cash fund the plant. And then that just got away from us.
And just for assumptions, is it a 3% inflation rate year over year that we're using for these assumptions?
Great question. So for general inflation, 3%, so that's some of the operation and maintenance costs go up 3%. There are some costs that the PERS costs and things like that have a higher in escalation rate based on those trends and what's forecast. And for capital, I'm using 3.5%, though the 45 million is just a number that staff felt comfortable using for that long-term projection. Yeah. This chart then just shows those same expenditures, annual expenditures, but the colors represent which funding sources are anticipated for those expenditures. So you can see that in the short run, it's current revenues, which is rates and current reserves. As was discussed, the plant is a combination of things, 32 million in debt proceeds, some rates, some from other agencies, 5 million, and some from SDCs. Obviously, that funding plan is key to this whole system plan and will be refined a number of times between now and when that design of that plant actually occurs.
Quick question. I'm just curious why there are no SDCs anticipated until 2033 on this graph.
The SDCs in the short term are going to pay for debt service. Yeah, so we do anticipate that the city will receive SDCs. And there is some SDC eligibility for the HB 2001 projects, I believe. But most of the SDCs are being banked or either being used currently to fund debt service or held in reserve for this big plant.
And I just wanted to comment on that too. So part of the SDC reform that the council did a couple years ago was recognizing that our SDCs are kind of wonky. So we have a lot of SDCs for wastewater, which is now very helpful because of the oxidation ditch that we have to build. But we have almost no SDCs accrued for water. And so that was part of the analysis that council had did when adjusting the SDC model, was taking into account that we have this big project that we have to do and we've accrued almost no SDCs to use for that.
Let me add to that. And a key thing to note here is that after these pipe replacements, we're not going to be doing any water projects. Let's hope we don't have any big problems because we need to save the money for that thing, and that thing has to happen.
Yeah. And then I just wanted to comment too on the debt. So in Deb's model, we had planned on it just being a general obligation bond, which would be something that goes out to the voters. So that would be something that all of the residents in the city of Newburgh would have to vote on in order for that. So it's a little bit different. So it would be something on your property tax bill versus a traditional revenue bond that we've done previously for other water projects. And so it's just a different mechanism, but we felt that that would be probably the preferred method, but it's still something that we're exploring. If we were to do a revenue bond, there would be different things that we would have to consider that maybe we would need even more rate increases to look at, because then you have certain percentage of debt covenants that you have to cover with the rates in order to guarantee being able to pay it back and things like that. So then that's why we were planning on maybe doing a general obligation bond for a giant project like this.
We hope people will vote yes for water.
One more general question. Based on Newburgh's growth and this anticipated need, is this as far out as we can push this plant?
Let me take
Or
that.
could it go out further? I know the costs go up higher, but
The
if it goes-
the answer to that is unknowable, and I'll explain. We created a whole group of correlation curves to figure out where we hit the problem. It depends on housing production. And frankly, the mill site. So the mill site's not in our water consumption modeling, it's only houses. If someone does buy the mill site and they need if they're a Coca-Cola or whatever, right? They need lots of potable water, we have a problem sooner. If mortgages stay high, housing stays slow, it could be further into the 2030s. So I can't say with more confidence than, somewhere in there, we have to have this water plan.
I have a question. Has conservation of water program been thought about ways to, again, push that build date out further? I know coming from the electric industry, that's what we were doing with some of our, back in the 80s and 90s when we were going to see huge demands. We did institute a number of conservation plans that were fairly effective.
So actually, we have not only been doing marketing around that and offering things that people don't want to use, like shower reducers and stuff like that, but the houses that are getting built today have, shall we call it, less satisfying flushes. So a lot of those things are being built into houses with the tank design so houses and things are getting more efficient over time and using less water. But I think there's still this median factor where we were going with the average domestic consumption averaged out amongst all of our households. It's still hard to say where we're going to land. And it really depends on national market forces with regard to the mortgage lending rate.
A question for you. So the target was to hit half of the, well, potentially half of between 45 and 50 million to pay I saw skin in the game, the cash component. What's the balance now? Is it zero? And we're saying that these 4 are going to be the years it's coming?
We have a good bit in the bank, and we feel confident we can hit this half number.
Yep.
Of course, if Dundee came in with us,
Sure.
if we got money from elsewhere, from the feds or somebody, that would be great.
What if we sold our water rights to Coca-Cola and the water plant? money in that.
It's funny you should say that. So one thing that's in our cards that we're holding in our hand is if we get close to this point and no other external funding has come in and Dundee walk away from the table like they did last time, then it's possible that we might do exactly that, Derek.
Okay. So looking at this slide, the good news is that there is relatively little debt still outstanding for the water system. And because the city did have a practice and kind of a policy to try to cash fund as much as possible over the last decade or so. And so we've got a couple of loans that are, the existing debt basically drops off within the next 5 years. So that means that SDC's rates can go to fund capital, cash fund capital, and then build up the fund balance for the water, the big water project. As we did for wastewater, we look at the projected revenue versus what was projected in the last plan update. And because of the slightly slower growth than was anticipated, and we've modified our projections a little bit to be consistent with the more recent trends, the projected revenues are slightly lower. Not anything, too crazy, but
Some of that is efficiency measures.
yeah. Mm-hmm. Exactly. We do, though, build into our forecast a continued decline in the average use per account because of the fact that the new customers are more efficient, have more efficient fixtures. But the account growth was slightly under what the prior projections were. And so, the trend line is not as steep, and we're starting from a slightly lower base. But again, that could also push out the need for the plant if, so it's all a lot of assumptions that get mixed together. And water sales volumes, you can see in this chart, they kind of bounce around a bit. That's a big part due to weather. And also the scale of this makes it seem more extreme too, because it doesn't start at 0. But just to show that the updated actuals were in 23-24 actually dipped below what was anticipated. And so therefore the forecast going forward is slightly lower as well. And as with sewer, the water revenue is a function of both the number of accounts as well as the volume. So both of those play into how we forecast the revenue. All right, so this chart shows, and this, I think, Derek, is where you can kind of see the fund balance. So we start in 2026 with over 14, just right about 14 million. But if you'll remember from last time, there's a $6 million loan to sewer. And that's why you see it decline immediately in 2027. But then it starts, and then it also declines because of the HB 2001 capital improvements. And then it starts to climb back up through 2032, right before the plant. And then you see it take a very steep decline. Yes, Katie.
I just want to say something about the loan. The one good thing about loaning ourselves money, in particular the water fund, the wastewater fund will get to pay the water fund back with interest. So that only helps us for our next capital project to do that's why we picked these particular funds. So the wastewater can hopefully pay the water fund back with interest for our next project.
Better than paying interest outside the city.
Yes.
Yeah, which is what you would have to do. Yes, go ahead.
Can you explain what that contingency dotted line is? Because that's not on the wastewater graph, equivalent graph at all.
The wastewater
last-
graphs, we had a minimum fund balance
Mhm.
line, and the contingency is basically the bare minimum that you want to take the balance down to. You always need some contingency for unknown events, lower than anticipated revenues. Yeah, whatever. So that's a bare minimum kind of floor if you will, for the fund balance that we use in the plan. As was talked about, I think last time, that's pretty low, especially compared to where you've been. And so it's a thing to keep your eye on. And, there's just, that's so far out in the plan that we need to, what we're trying to do is balance the risk, but also minimize the rate increase in the near term. If things look like, you need to revise some of the assumptions, have greater reserves in the future for the next set of projects, then that will need to be looked at further at that time. So the bars represent the different components of the costs. And so you see the big jump up in 2027 is that loan, that sewer loan. Then you see the gray line go down. That's because that the expenditures are significantly higher than the sort of gold line, which is the current revenues. And anytime the revenues are less than all the expenses, the fund balance line drops. Now, what you'll see in the 2029 to 2032 period is what I don't have included in the gold revenue line is the payback of the sewer loan from the sewer fund. So I just kept the gold to be revenues that are generated, excuse me, by the water rates and charges. So even though that line is slightly below the expenses, the fact that the sewer loan is being repaid, that brings the fund balance back up. So that helps, as was said, that money is being used by the sewer to keep those rates lower, and any interest owing stays within the city. It's a win-win. So the big question will be the funding for the plant. At this point in time, the assumption is that the debt service will be borne by property taxes and not the rates. If that changes, then the gold line needs to tilt up significantly.
Yes, yeah, there's, yeah. Thing about it. So there is one positive thing, which is this. We're going to continue to pursue any state or federal money we can possibly get that we don't know about yet. If we do get any money, we're going to try to chip away at parts of this water plant. That means if we get enough money, we would start design work. If we get money, we would build the extra pipeline that takes the water to the new site. So that is going to be an ongoing goal of mine from now through till my retirement in 2035.
Oh, importantly, this line, it says in the text, I didn't highlight it though, that this revenue forecast does assume that continuation of the 5% per year rate increase. And it's needed clearly to meet the expenditures within the period, but also to bring that reserve line to have some additional cash available and minimize borrowing even from property taxes. We want to limit that as much as we can.
Quick question on personnel services. Is that assuming same headcounts as we have currently? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, we didn't add any staff.
I know we had the conversation last meeting about rate differentials, what that might mean for the city, but in this case, this just means what we have now extended on.
Yes.
Let's hope those androids turn out to be as good as the marketing.
The other question is the 5% rate. If I'm reading this correctly, it barely keeps us right where we need to be. In other words, there's not a lot of fluff on one side. It's not getting us too hard. We think it's right where we need to go. So anything less than that will go off and start shortchanging us as far as what we need to do.
Correct. Yes.
Sorry. But the risk there obviously is if the voters vote no in those days, then what? We can't make enough water. We had a long dry summer this year. We were running at 4.1 mega gallons all through the summer, every summer day, just as another data point.
I think another point with that is that trend of our summer consumption, from what I've heard other places, it's going up. Right? So each year it's not, we don't see a cyclic trend. We just see a steady increase each summer, more water being consumed, period. And everyone across the world's seen this.
Yeah, I mean, of course, Ron, there are unpleasant things that we can do. We can have water sprinkler rationing, and we can add other measures if we had to, but those will not be palatable to the residents.
I think my key point is it's the safest assumption 2027, 2028 are going to increase water consumption in the summer periods. You'll be lucky if it's the same. And that's where, again, the 5% kind of helps us. It's built in that kind of what we need to do. I want to make sure we understand that facet. Don't want to increase rates. But on the flip side of it, we got to do the right things for the water system so it maintains.
Yes, I concur. Based on some recent nice summers we've had, we're having some nice summers, and they're driving this.
What caused the reduction in water sales volume in 2023-24?
The primary driver of those patterns is the way the summer goes. So if we were to do a retrospective next year of this year, we would see that we had a long, dry summer. We actually used a lot more water this summer. If next June, July, August is rainy and whatnot, then our water production will be less and our consumption will be less.
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
Every summer, no sunshine.
As with the, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, we're, at this point in the presentation, we're talking, we want to increase revenues. So we want more water, more heat,
True.
more water.
Up to a certain ceiling.
Up to 4.4. See?
Gardens become fashionable.
Okay.
Actually, that's a point. Is there any, so you talked about conservation. And I know there's the shower heads and the low flow efficiencies, but there's a point, like I said, we got rid of our yard. Just for numerous reasons, but water consumption was one of them. I don't know if there's an actual campaign or something we can do to make that encourageable. I don't know.
I haven't tried that, but I'm willing to give it a spin.
For what it's worth, I took out our front yard and our water bill went down, and it's lower in the summer than the winter right now. Wow. For real.
Okay.
It's something I don't think we've capitalized on. It's something we kind of did for ourselves because we're getting older. And we just don't want to fight with it as much. But it's something to kind of, there's some economics to it. Along with
Lots of tools in the tree. We don't want to kill the trees.
Maybe we'll think of something better.
Turf. Okay, so this slide just shows you then the actual water rates that were implemented at the beginning of the month. Like the sewer charges, the water rates include a billing charge, which is flat, fixed dollars a month for all customer classes. And then with water, you have a meter charge that increases with the size of the meter. Most residential customers are served by the 3/4 inch meter. So you have the 2222 per month. And then you have the volumetric rate on top of it, which varies by customer class. I know last time there was a question about outside city customers. So I did just note in the footnote that they're about 1% of the meters and about 2.5% of water use. So a pretty small amount. And I think for sewer, it's even fewer. Yeah, so. Right, yes.
Just a little detail on this rates. For example, the fixed charges would be for most residents $22 and then $4 makes $26. Yet on this handout you gave us tonight, it's much more reasonable.
Yeah, it's
Go to the
pretend.
second one. It's 2620, which is those two numbers.
The handouts are mock-up.
Yeah, the
There
handout's
it
just pretend.
is. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I asked the same question.
This one here is what, if we sent the bill to you in the mail, that's what it looks like. If you get it electronically, it was the other one. And this one is like a prorated, where this is a full month.
Those two numbers you had. Okay.
Yes.
The volume charges vary by customer class because customers use water differently throughout the year, and those that use water more in the summer contribute more to the peaking requirements, the capacity that's needed in the system to meet the irrigation and other summer water use demands. Also, that drives certainly the planning of the timing of when the plant is going to have to come online. So there are significant costs associated with meeting those peak summer demands. So that's why irrigation customers pay significantly more, which is certainly an incentive if you're an irrigation customer to reduce your the amount of area that you're irrigating as those rates continue to go up. So it's assumed that the 5% is applied across the board.
The non-potable rate, is that like the rate the golf course pays? Are there other customers that use non-potable water?
There's a small number of other customers, and unfortunately, the layout of the city does not allow us to put purple pipe affordably. It's called purple pipe water. To put it through the whole city is just never going to happen because of all the boring under all the major roads. So only when they're near a purple pipe source, which is either the water plant or we have one of our wells, the Otis Springs well, which is no longer deemed safe for drinking. It can be used to provide purple pipe water, which it does to some of the Crestview development, but it's only in those areas that are adjacent to sources.
And how was the outside city rate established?
That was a policy that was implemented a very long time ago, predates me, and I've been around a number of years. It looks like, I think it was a 50% surcharge on the outside city, which is very common. Generally, those are anywhere from 25% to sometimes 100% of the inside city rates. So there's, lots of different factors that can go into that. Some of it is the cost of service, pipes being, taken out. Yeah. So, yeah, but I'm not sure exactly what the rationale when it was first established. Okay. Finally, the bill impacts based on the 5% annual rate increases. That's approximately $3 a month each year that the residential bill would go up for a typical residential customer using 700 cubic feet. As we talked about, these bills don't anticipate the additional debt service associated with the water plant. It's assumed that those would be paid through the property tax rates and payments. And so we've estimated here based on the debt service that could add about 69 cents per $1,000 of assessed value or $271 per year per average household. So just to a couple last slides here, just on back to our, this is about resiliency we need a resilient water system to provide water 24/7. So we need a financial plan that's also resilient to maintain and deliver that infrastructure. We've seen what happens when the city doesn't have a rate increase one year and then the rate increases in future years are much higher. So having moderate annual adjustments helps to minimize any spikes. Obviously, this with the plant and getting that financial plan, financing plan nailed down is going to be key in the future to minimizing any spikes should the property tax plan not work, or hopefully some external funds come in and then allow that rate increase to be lower. Like the wastewater system, the water rates are designed to generate 30 to 40% of the revenue from those monthly service charges, because 80+% of the costs are fixed. And so if consumers use less water, the costs don't go down in the same proportion. So we need to have a base amount of revenue that's fixed and to ensure that the city can pay the bills. And maintaining those contingencies or reserves, certainly the reserves you can see have been so key to helping the city to deal with fluctuations in capital improvement costs and have a lot more flexibility to loan itself money to other, systems within the city. It's really a win-win situation. Just wish there were more, but you're actually in really good shape compared to some of my other clients. So as with any plan, there will be pressures up and down as we go forward. You have benefited from steady customer growth, even though it was a little bit lower than was anticipated. We still project that it will be 1% or so per year. If that speeds up, it's a good thing for water sales. It's not a good thing for the plant. So we don't want to have that happen too quickly. Good portion of the debt, is paid off in the next few years. And hopefully you can leverage the reserves and the payback in the loan to the sewer fund to pay for a good portion of the plant. But there are pressures from the continued capital investments need, the known and the not known, perhaps at this point in time, but we have assumed some kind of contingency expenditures. And inflation appears to be moderating, and hopefully that will continue, as well as a robust economic activity. With that, that concludes the water rate presentation.
That's one thing I'd like to add is that we don't have a lot of other levers to pull, folks. I've been coming here for 5 years and there's no new staff. We haven't added more staff. So there's not a lot I can do other than not add more staff, which is really hard. So that's it. And I wasn't joking. We are starting to look at the possibilities of AI-powered robots to do some things that humans have done, because I'm going to have to look at something.
Has there been a cost of service study for the electric service? And again, coming from the electric background, we did a lot of our rates based upon what was the cost of service and what's the cost of energy and delivery and that kind of thing. So you said about 30 or 40% is kind of a fixed base. Is that related to the cost of service, or is that just some standard that's been developed?
Well, it's typical in the water rate industry that kind of the new benchmark is that 40% revenue recovery from fixed is an appropriate balance, recognizing that the fixed costs of the system are so high. The cost of service you can look at it from an accounting sort of what's a fixed cost versus a variable cost. In that case, it's very high fixed and very low volume. We also look at it from a functional standpoint of why does the utility incur the costs that it does? It incurs it to produce average, amount of water and during the peak season. And so the cost of service for water that we did 2 years ago really focuses on looking at those, who's driving the system peaks. And that's why you see those variable rates by class. So that reflects the cost of service. Part of that was also to estimate what costs, customer service, billing, other sorts of costs are just flat. That's why you see the billing charge. So these rates do reflect the cost of service as, as best as we can estimate for a customer class, both in terms of the function as well as balancing the fixed and variable nature of the system, of the costs.
As another useful number, our labor costs, our complete build-up for labor costs have gone up by between 9 and 9.1% per year, every single year. So it's the steady march of the cost of labor without having more labor is an ongoing problem.
I have a question. As I'm looking at like account growth and I'm thinking about developments in town, so we have the addition of like Crestview Crossing expanding out. We have the properties in it. I don't remember what the time, I wanted to say it's like an 8-year timeline on the properties across from Northwest Christian on Mountain View there. Is that where this number is taken into an account as well as the other planning permits that are part of this?
Yes, because what we're seeing is at the moment in the medium planning horizon, there's about 450, 500 units. The speed with which those units get added, that's that variable that I'm not sure about. If Colina goes at the rate of 50 or 60 units per year, like they're sort of looking at, that's not going to do much to move that needle. But on the other hand, it's a wicked problem, as they say, because if we have a surge of housing, we suddenly need that water plant sooner. So.
And do we have much property that's annexed inside of Newburgh to build on currently?
Through that planning horizon that I'm talking about, we're not going to run out of land, but it's majority controlled by one interest. And so they're going to determine the rate at which that housing hits the market.
We're talking about the bill generating the revenue for this via the property tax. Then you mentioned there's also a revenue bond option. So you mentioned that we can't control what is going to happen with a vote to the real estate bond, but you do have other options. It sounds like that you could potentially attempt.
Other options.
We do have other options, but I think I think we wanted to get community buy-in to buy the water plant to, because it's a huge thing that's going to impact either way we do it. We'll either have to raise the rates probably more than 5% because clearly we're not going to get even half of that, in that horizon. So the rates would have to go up significantly in order for us to fund that. And then we'll be taking on debt for another 20 to 25 years doing that. So I think that part of the reason we wanted to do the property tax vote was because we wanted the residents of the city to vote on it and have, a consensus from them that they wanted us to build this. And it wasn't just us making that decision that we wanted that.
And then another point about that is it's kind of, this is it's a dream that people have had, our council and others that have got behind the idea of trying to get rid of our debt. So if we end up digging ourselves right back into the same hole that we were in after having fought so hard to get rid of our debt, that would be a miserable situation. So I'm still hoping that some really big bipartisan infrastructure bill will come through and we'll be able to get some federal dollars to help as well. These are the things I'm hoping for.
How do our rates compare to communities around us about the same size and things? I know my daughter recently moved to Albany, said her water bill dropped in half compared to what it was in Newburgh.
I want to take that. I'll take that.
Well, we will be bringing back we're working on it right now, a bill comparison. We like to do it with all the utilities combined. I will say, in past comparisons, the sewer rates have been on the higher end. The water rates are kind of more towards the center. But the fact that Newburgh is an independent system, unlike a lot of the regional utilities around the area, that does mean that the average rate or the average bill tends to be higher. So the small cities with their own systems don't benefit from the economies of scale that the larger, like Clean Water Services of Washington County that serves, 12 or 15 cities, they have lower rates. So, but we'll bring that information back.
Which Albany? So New York?
Oregon.
Oh, and I don't, so, okay, I don't know anything about what they're doing. If you were referring to the one in New York, I was going to talk about Measure 5 and Measure 50, so I won't need to do that. Thank you.
Will, an ex-librarian walks into a place called Albany and
Yeah, the only thing I want to mention is just down the road, at the school board meeting, they're talking about a levy as well. So just in terms of appetite for Newburgh residents to take on additional revenue. I know that's relatively new as part of the discussion, but I think it should be something that's on the radar of the city, which I'm sure you're aware of, but that's also ongoing as well.
You're absolutely right. And I was actually at all of the redistricting meetings just to hear what was going on. So I knew that was on their radar. But at the end of the day, if an attempt to get the voters to help with this doesn't work, then we can still look for other debt options. I'll leave here feeling defeated that my point in my life here wasn't successful. But at the end of the day, we can do that.
We do have other debt options, but it would require us to put the full burden on the water rates. And I don't think that would be a popular option. And looking at how high our sewer is, that's why our sewer rates are so high, is because it has a very large debt that we're still working on paying off. So then it would be the water also that would continue having a huge.
Yep. Now, the good news is if we can get the oxidation ditch finished with cash, then we're going to not add any more burden to that rate. And when that one comes off, the pressure will come off of that rate, the wastewater rate. So this is what we're trying to do here, is not add these burdens.
We try to start the meetings good with wastewater where we're cash funding, and then we throw this one in the mix where it's not quite as good. So.
I applaud you for the consideration. I think last year at this time I said it's going to take a bond, and to now have it on the table as part of the plan, I think that's very responsible. So
thank you, Derek. Away from us, yeah. Like we dreamed of cash funding, but
yeah, it's not realistic.
I will say that last week I did a presentation to a water agency that is facing 15% rate increases for the next 5 years plus. They purchased their water from the city of Portland, and their contracts got all renegotiated, and so they're just those small water districts, they're going through the roof. So even though this is a tough looking one, you're in better shape than, by having your own system there, you do assert certain control that other customers of larger districts maybe don't have.
The only other question.
We can't join Clean Water Services, not unless we've got
The only other question I had was in regards to the potential, I guess, levy on the household price for the 391K assessed value. Is that the median assessed value price for Newburgh? Because I live in a fairly nice house and we haven't caught up to that number yet.
So it's actually 300,000 for today's price, but we escalated it. Yeah, because of when
That's
we
a wild
expected it.
guess.
Yeah.
No, I know we have
That's a
like
good point,
caps
yeah.
on it as well, so like we can only grow at a certain rate. And I would say probably where our house is at now is probably within the value had we not had the explosion on, residential home prices, from when we bought it, but I just wanted to make sure that
Yeah.
that assumption.
We had used 300,000 and just escalated
That's a
it.
great observation.
Yeah.
And of course, the other thing is back to the Albany, New York remark. Wherever you live in the union, you're going to be paying the bill. In some states, it's on the property tax. In some states, there ends up being a balance on the rates, but the stuff still has to get paid for.
Yeah, so if there's no other questions, I just wanted to mention, we're gonna combine both utilities next meeting, Storm and Tough. And that will be on February 10th at 5:30 again in this room. And I'll turn it over to Ned, the chair.
Okay, well, seeing as we've made it through all this, the rate review committee meeting is now adjourned. Thank you for coming.